idea centering around TEES and even more importantly around decentralized front ends. Now, when you think about a decentralized front ends, you're obviously thinking about the hosting, the serving of that content, but more importantly, far too often we forget to talk about the domain name system and the name servers that are resolving requests to access different IPs, domains, things of that nature. And so when you kind of break it down, right, DNS is the phone book for the internet. It's going to allow you to resolve the plain text address, google.com, to the IP address that the DNS has in its records to allow the machine to read that, send it to the host server, and then serve you back the front end. What is less talked about within this kind of interaction is the different levels of domains and the varying layers of security or authentication that happen when you make these requests. Now, obviously, you have your root domain, the dot, and then you have your top level domain, and then underneath that, your kind of sublevels. There is the vulnerability or opportunity for the DNS record holder to serve back the user information, data, whatever it might be that is disadvantageous for that user. It could be a wide variety of things. Now, within that kind of framework, about 15 years ago, I'm honestly going to botch this, but a conglomerate within the greater kind of internet decided to pull together domain name system security extensions. And these were meant to be a stamp of approval, basically saying that these different root domains that are being served to you have been authenticated and verified using a public key and a private key. Now, unfortunately, less than about 15% of domains across the internet actually ascribe to this framework. It varies. If you look at November's data of .com and .net domains, it's less than 4%. And I think naturally within our space, we can all recognize that there's an inherent risk, especially as we're talking about DeFi, to having bad actors getting access to these DNS records and serving something to the end user that is then unfortunately manipulated to the worst kind of outcome. Now, when you think about managing a name server, there's two options really. It's an authoritative name server that you run yourself, which is this beautiful idyllic log cabin that is off the grid in Alaska, and you have to get your own wood, water, set up your own outhouse, all the 9 yards, or you use a fully managed service. This is something like a Cloudflare, an Atakai, things of that nature. But again, even though they run the DNSSEC underneath the hood, you're still relying on a centralized entity to serve you, again, the front end data, whatever that experience is that you're expecting. So within that, thinking about decentralization, front ends, the space we work in, TEEs naturally offer a very interesting kind of new primitive to explore. And within that, it's allowing something like a multi-sig, something like a kind of core, a conditional proof, if you will, that has multi-signers and enables access only to the multi-sig of the credentials, to the DNS records and settings, versus holding that in a fully managed service like Cloudflare. Within that, you would then have to use a number of different partners in order to facilitate this possibility, right? So at the root domain level, but then you would also need to use a domain registrar, something like a .box domains, and then working with someone like an ENS or a 3DNS to then actually create this chain of trust, if you will, that is now an added layer of security beyond what the DNSSEC kind of authenticates to a user who's requesting that front end. And so theoretically, you could have a multi-sig, multi-signers holding the credentials to that root, or the DNS record rather. You could also do something that is more data-based, conditional-based, as I kind of mentioned before. Obviously, this is still a bit exploratory, but having already had these kind of early conversations with those partners and kind of experiencing this as a non-technical user myself, of coming across a MetaMask phishing warning or things of this nature that we're all probably familiar with more or less. It is something that we're excited to kind of be pushing out towards the end of this year. And ultimately, I think this is going to be more of a primitive and public good for the greater space as a whole, and eventually something ideally we'd be able to bring back to, Web 2 interactions. That is, my kind of high-level overview on trustless name servers, decentralizing front ends. No time for questions, but I'll be around if you guys want to chat later. And thank you.